everyone. Welcome to the Legacy Café podcast with your host, Robb, author of the book, How Will You Be Remembered? The definitive guide to creating and sharing your life story. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and find yourself a seat in the Legacy Café. Here's Robb.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, it's Robb Lucy. Hello, everybody. You know, the financial industry, when I got into this legacy game, I had a number of financial people say to me that the word legacy has been stolen by the money industry. And I agree to that. It's much bigger than that. Legacy isn't just money sent down to the generations and sometimes causing, well, not the good that was intended. So today we're going to talk about a proactive plan to create and leave a lasting legacy when you are an individual or a family or a business. Jeff Rogers is the founder and chairman of Stewardship Legacy Coaching in Ocoee, Florida, a dot in the map I've never been to. And he's got a program called Create a Thriving Family Legacy, how to share your wisdom and wealth with your children and grandchildren. Hi there, Jeff.
Hi, Robb. Thanks for having me on your podcast today on Legacy Café, and hi to all your listeners.
This is a big area. So we had three audiences there, an individual, a family, and a business. I'm going to go to the middle and the family. You've probably run into families that the dynamics are a little bit different. Is this a tough conversation to deal with what we do with our wealth to create some good? Is it a tough conversation or a joyful conversation or a bit of both?
Yeah, it absolutely can be a bit of both, and that depends on the family to a great degree and how functional or, for that matter, dysfunctional they are. But one of the key things that we've seen is that a lot of times people focus too much on just the wealth transfer aspects. And so one of the unique things that we do, Robb, is we help them to think through not only the wealth transfer aspects, but the wisdom transfer aspects and how to help make sure their children and grandchildren are properly prepared to be, wise recipients of that wealth so that it's a blessing to them and not a curse, so that it ends up helping them and not harming them.
How do you pass wisdom down? That's a toughie.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, we use wisdom in that context in a holistic way to literally talk about wisdom and life lessons, but also things like family values, virtues, and character, even your faith, passing those things down. So when we use wisdom transfer, we're using it kind of in that holistic manner. But there are numerous things that can be done and tools that can be used to help transfer wisdom and family values and so forth down to children and grandchildren and future generations.
We've talked about values before in the cafe, and that is sometimes when an individual is writing their legacy letter or getting in touch and knowing your values is real important. Do most families know what the heck their values are? And how is that conversation taken over? And how do you pass those values to the kids again?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I would say that the majority of families, we'll call them Generation 1 patriarchs, they know intuitively what some of their values are, but they've never thought about it deeply, and they've never codified them. They've never really thought through, what are our values, what are the things our family stands for, and what are those values that we want to transfer down. So they have a feel about it intuitively, but to your point, Robb, they haven't put much thought into it, and they haven't been intentional and proactive about how do we transfer those down to our children and grandchildren.
Do you lead those discussions? It must be pretty interesting to get people nodding and saying, yeah, we really have not discussed this.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about air preparation and transferring these things down to children and grandchildren, we find that resonates with people. They don't just want to pass on their money and their stuff. They want to do that, but they know that oftentimes money can be a curse, just like it can be a blessing. And so they want to make sure that they're well prepared. And so, yes, we do lead the conversations and ultimately help families to craft a family vision, mission, and core values, or sometimes we call them guiding principles statements. And then not only to create them at, I'll call it the husband and wife level at generation one, but then also how to engage the children, grandchildren, sometimes, even four generations. How do we then engage them in that process? But it all starts with helping Gen 1 to get clarity about, what is their family vision and mission, the vision for their family, and then what are those core values that they want to pass on.
Let's assume for a second the lights go on. So the lights go on the tax side, which is pretty linear. I can understand how that could happen. You have to structure yourself so that all the money doesn't go to Uncle Sam. What about on the wisdom transfer, though? How do these families now pick the legacies they want to create? How do you help them down that road?
Yeah. So first of all, it starts by casting the vision. What is the vision of what we want to accomplish for our family? And so we walk them through a process. We call it the Stewardship Legacy Goals Conversation, where we look at 5 different areas of their legacy. And we have a conversation. It's actually typically a 3 or 4 hour conversation where we ask them a series of questions related to these 5 areas of legacy, which are talked about in my book, Create a Thriving Family Legacy, How to Share Your Wisdom and Wealth with Your Children and Grandchildren. And those 5 areas of legacy are your personal legacy. What do you want that to look like as an individual? Second, your family legacy, children, grandchildren, future generations. Third is your financial legacy. Fourth, for business owners, is their business legacy. What do they want the legacy of their business to look like? And then the 5th area is what we call their philanthropic legacy, or for those people that come from the Christian faith, we call it their kingdom legacy. What do they want to do that will actually have an impact on eternity? But so we look at these 5 different areas of legacy, and we're walking them through what are their goals in each of those 5 different areas.
If I can interrupt you just for a second, it could be the Christian kingdom legacy, but it also pertains to any other religion, I would imagine, too, whether Judaism or Islam or something. Everybody has a need to have a benefit to this on the plane we live now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, for people that don't come from the Christian faith, we call it their philanthropic legacy, because, many people will have, whether they're religious or even non-religious, they will have causes that they care about. They want to do good for society, the betterment of mankind generally, and that would include whatever faith people may come from. And we have people from all different faiths that interact, and people of no faith as well.
So, Jeff, have you seen a moment in the room with the family there where somebody said, "Wow, we could do that," where they kind of do wake up to their wisdom and values and the ability to build something that is pretty meaningful for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the exciting things is how this process can bring the generations together, and get them unified around common causes in some case, or things that they want to do, whether it's in their local community or even globally. For example, we've had a number of families who, one of the tools that we use sometimes when it's the right fit is to have the family go on a vision or mission trip to a third world country. And so one of the purposes for that is to get the children out of their context, out of their comfort zone of this cushy American Western culture, and get them to a place where they see the needs of a world that is hurting and suffering and stuff around that maybe they read about it in a book or saw something on TV, but they've never really experienced it. They've never really seen people who are starving, or people who don't have clean water or jobs to be able to make a living. And so we've seen families where the parents and the children go on this trip, and it ends up being something that is transformational. They come back really realizing how blessed and how fortunate they are, how much they have, and it can cause them to really become others oriented instead of being so self-focused and narcissistic in some cases in this selfie world, and then can actually rally the family in some cases around, hey, we want to get involved, we want to roll up our sleeves, we want to not only donate money, but we want to use our leadership and influence and get other families involved, maybe our country club or church youth group or whatever, and we want to have an impact on this village over in wherever, like the Africa or Asia or South America or wherever. And so that can be a transformational experience and this is one example.
I want to talk to you about now versus later, because it is, if people have listened to the Legacy Cafe, one of my beliefs is that we have been taught that legacy is what you find out from your eulogist, and it's just a little darn late to leave it till then. What are your thoughts on creating the legacies, whether the family or the individual? We'll get to business in a minute, but creating them now so you can enjoy them now, so you can see them happening, so those eyes do get a little bit wider. I mean, I guess probably the family heading to that village in a third world country is part of that. But give me your thoughts on doing it now when you have the resources and you can see the effect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are passionate about what you just said, Rob, and the way we like to put it, the way I put it in my book is that a legacy is something that you live out now while you're alive. It's not something you leave behind after you die. Yes, it's that. But to your point, Rob, it's something that we need to really be living out now. And again, that has to do with, how we're living our lives. Are we living with intentionality? Are we looking at whether it's the needs of our family or the world around us or our community or whatever? And are we doing things now, using our time, our talents, our leadership, relationships, and influence? Are we investing in the lives of those around us and being able to pass on the wisdom and life lessons and values that we have to them? But then also, even from a financial legacy perspective, to your point, there's great opportunities to do our giving while we're living so that we're knowing where it's going. And like you said, we get to see the impact of it. And there's significant opportunities there. And what we find is that sometimes people struggle with the questions of how much is enough, both for ourselves. Do we have enough? Can we afford to really be that generous now? And so part of the wealth transfer aspect and the financial legacy is thinking through how much do we have? Do we have sufficient resources? And what is that number? Helping them to quantify that. And as my friend Ron Blue says, set a financial finish line where we're not just mindlessly, endlessly accumulating just to build a bigger barn and a bigger pile of money that we're going to leave behind someday. But once we have a level of financial freedom, which is what we try to help people to get their hands around, whether or not they're at that point, then they can become exceedingly generous now while they're alive. So it's both non-financial stuff that we can do to live out our legacy and be a blessing to others, in the ways that we talked about, wisdom transfer and values transfer and so forth, and volunteering and serving, but also financially giving now while we're living as well. And like you said, we get to see the benefit of that and how it's blessing others.
You've alluded to it here, but I can imagine somebody listening to you and I now. They may say to themselves, "Okay, that's all well and good, but you've got to be rich to go through this coaching stuff. I'm not rich." What do you say to them?
Again, legacies are not all about the money. Hopefully, I've been clear about that. It's holistic. It's the 5 different areas of legacy. Financial is only one of them. And when you look at some of the people, even historically, with the biggest, most significant legacies, they were not wealthy people. They were poor people, and sometimes insignificant in many ways at one point, but they ended up having great impact on the world and even on history. So I would say living out a legacy is more about what you do, even than what you give in terms of financially. The financial legacy, again, is just one component of a holistic legacy.
Well, there's a whole lot to think about. Your book is called Create a Thriving Family Legacy. We talked here about not only family, but business and personal. And what comes to my mind is it's just the questions have to be asked. And once the questions are asked and clarity reigns, that can be pretty freeing, I think, for anybody with some resources to know they want to create a legacy. And here's how to do it. And here's how to do it when you're here and you can enjoy the darn thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We find most people get energized about this whole process of thinking it through, and then being intentional to create the kind of legacy, thriving legacy we like to call it, that they really want to not only leave behind but live out, as you said earlier, Rob. And not that there aren't a potential minefield of things that they could step on that will blow the process up. There certainly are, and that's why people need a coach, a guide, so that they're not out there on their own walking through the minefield of things that in some cases can blow up the family or the business. And so it is important, especially if people have significant wealth or complex assets like a business, or complex family situations. Blended families are one of the areas that we've done a lot of work in, because there's so many blended families now, and you got his, you got hers, you got ours, and one of them brought a lot of the wealth into the marriage, the other one didn't. How do you navigate those things? Well, they have to be navigated, and the good news is it can be done in a way that is really honoring to all the parties involved, and can be a blessing to everybody.
Well, let's get all the people listening to the Legacy Cafe to take one step into that minefield. But you know what, Jeff? We need some help. Have you got something you can give our listeners that would make them aware of just the kind of questions and knowledge that would be beneficial for them if they are considering a legacy and they may have some resources to get her done? Yeah.
So here's some things that we have available, Rob, that I think would be a good start for people. Number one, we've got some sample chapters from the book that they can download for free. Of course, they're welcome to buy the book as well. We would love them to do that. It's on Amazon and most other places. But they can get a couple of free sample chapters and begin reading through that, and I think they would be inspired by that process. And then we also have a legacy journal that, as you said, has some questions that they can think through and talk through with their spouse, and it will absolutely get them started and thinking through these things. So we're happy to offer those to your audience free of charge. So we have an ebook that I wrote last year specifically for business owners on the stewardship of their business legacy, and it addresses some of the issues that we talked about in today's podcast.
Well, that's terrific. Those downloads that Jeff has kindly given us, we'll put them up at legacycafe.org/Jeff Rogers. Now, Jeff Rogers is JEFF-ROGERS, no D. legacycafe.org/JEFF Rogers, ROGERS. Jeff, thank you. There's a heck of a lot to talk about here, but I think we've probably filled the brains of everybody who's been listening. And thank you so much for this. And
thanks for having me on the Legacy Cafe, Rob.
You're welcome, Jeff. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, go to legacycafe.org/Jeff Rogers, JEFF-ROGERS, for these 3 downloads. Delightful to have all of you here. We'll see you again next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Legacy Cafe podcast. We have lots of great conversations coming your way. And by the way, if you want us to send you reminders that a new podcast is ready for you, go to legacycafe.org to subscribe. That's legacycafe.org. Have a great day, and remember, the coffee and conversations are always hot at the Legacy Cafe.